Welcome to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture, brought to you by Dallas Theological Seminary.
Hi, my name is Bill Hendricks. I'm the Executive Director for Christian Leadership at the Hendricks Center at Dallas Theological Seminary. And I want to welcome you to the Table Podcast, where we discuss issues of God and culture. It's a truism that the people who tell the stories in a culture are the people who create the culture. Mm-hmm. And in our culture, that basically means two main institutions. One of the universities and the other is the media and entertainment industry. And so today, I could not be more excited to have Dan and Peggy Rupple with us to talk about what they do in the media and entertainment industry on both coasts and in between. Dan is the CEO of Master Media. Master Media International serves as a trusted voice of faith to the mainstream media leaders of today, and an encouraging voice of experience to the media leaders of tomorrow. And I'm going to ask him to unpack that a little bit more. And Peggy is the Associate Director of the Windriders Forum. And again, I'm going to have her tell you about that really, really exciting thing that she's got going on. But Rupples, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Bill. It's good to be here.
On the Table Podcast. So, Dan, let's go ahead and start with you. Tell us a bit more about this idea of a trusted voice of faith, mm-hmm. both to the leaders of today and then a voice of experience to the leaders coming up.
Right. Well,
tell us a little bit about Master Media and how you got into it.
Right. Master Media was founded in 1985 by Dr. Larry Poland, and the media landscape, Bill, in 1985 was basically three TV networks and 6 film studios. So theoretically, if you form relationship with those 9 men, and it was all men, you pretty much canvassed and influenced, in the name of Christ, the media industry. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's all changed. In 2005, when the digital revolution hit, we marked 2005 because that's when YouTube was launched. Media changed. It was changed in all ways. Suddenly, the high pyramid and the gatekeepers started lowering a little bit, and it democratized the industry. Where a kid in Des Moines with a
camcorder,
could have a YouTube channel and be a cultural influencer because they reach 4 million followers, and that's not an exaggeration. It's commonplace. So we had to really redo a little bit of our strategy to reach it, since it's so widespread. So the reason we say a voice of faith, and I'll first address to the media leaders of today, and then we'll talk about the young people emerging, is because the media world has evolved from broadcast to narrowcast to nichecast. Mm-hmm. When I was young, 60 million people watched Bonanza on a Sunday night because that was almost the only game in town.
Right.
So it really was the America's campfire television, and there was this unified messaging going on to the culture. Well, and cable came, and that gave a little bit more. That came a little bit more narrow because there were more things, and now nichecast because there's a gazillion. So, platforms, channels, whatever. But here's where it's at, Bill, is now the audience is so fragmented that if they get 700,000 viewers, it's like, wow, we got a hit. This is pretty cool. So what happens is the industry is searching for communities that are underserved. They want to find an audience that will be loyal to their type of programming. And so they're looking around America, and that's why you're seeing these niches of programming. It's like, well, this is really to, people who want to remodel their home.
Right, or the people that are into vampires.
Yeah, they're into vampires or whatever it is. And many times, the community with the loudest voice in those rooms is the ones that gets heard, that gets represented on their screens. Their community gets reflected. Often, the absent voice is the Christian voice. So we're saying we want to serve the industry as a voice of faith, sometimes the sole voice of faith to these executives. I'll break it into really two things that we are hoping for. Number one, that we'll have a cultural impact. that they'll see the Christian community is a wonderful community. It's the biggest community in America.
Right.
Depending on how you define a Christian, it could be 240 million Americans believe in Christ. They need to know that and know the nuances of our community, the uniquenesses of our community. So we want to be that voice, but we also want to be that personal voice, that pastoral voice. They don't have that kind of caring pastoral voice in their lives. It's not uncommon, Bill. I'll walk in the first time I meet with someone. They could be the CEO of a media conglomerate. They're really high placed, and I'll walk in. They'll be a little guarded, and they'll say, "So, what do you want?"
Right. What do you want?
What do you want? And I'll say,
they know you have an agenda.
Yeah, they know I have an agenda. And I said, that's a fair question. I mean, you sit in a powerful seat. You have a lot of influence, a lot of authority, and I notice outside your door, you've got a line of people from 8 a.m. till Lord knows when you go home at night, and they all want something. They want you to greenlight their movie or whatever they might want. And I think that probably came at a cost personally to you, to have that kind of thing where everyone wants something from you. Right. It takes a toll. And I want you to know I don't really want anything. I'm here. I care about you. I want to see if I can serve you in any way. And before I leave, I'd like to pray with you. And Bill,
they don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do. They're a little bit, puzzled. But immediately they're disarmed. The arms go down. They lean in. And they start opening their lives because they realize, I can trust this guy. I'm not going to tell him something. He's going to go put it on social media within 3 minutes.
Right.
He's not going to leverage it to get ahead. But I really honestly care about him. And then the next time I come back, they'll give me 15 minutes, but then they'll stretch it to an hour and a half. They really want to talk because they don't have that kind of voice in their lives. And the other thing is, it gets kind of funny because before I even bring it up, they'll say, "You are going to pray, aren't you? You're going to pray for me, aren't you?" So it's a wonderful opportunity to serve that way, to be that voice of faith in their lives.
Well, I think that Christians often forget people everywhere have what I would call pastoral needs.
Yes.
They've got somebody in their life that's troubled. They've got stress themselves. They have a real concern over something. They have an uncertainty about something.
Yeah.
And those are all sort of moments to be pastoral. And those opportunities are always there. No matter if they're human, they're always there.
They are. And, the Me Too movement has fueled our conversations amazingly because, I've had 2 different executives call me at home and they say, I want you to know you're going to read in Variety tomorrow. I just got fired on Me Too charges, and I'd ask you to pray for me. So I'm able to pray for them. But the more common response is sometimes I'll be in an office and they'll go, "Dan, I'm disgusted by my industry. How did we allow this for decades to go unchecked and think it's the norm?" And they realize that they've been operating from a moral vacuum.
Right.
They don't have a true north. They don't have
an anchor.
An anchor. And and it comes back to that God created us in His image, and that we should have mutual respect in the innate value of all people. It's respecting one another, and instead of leveraging them for our pleasure, using them. That's the kind of the culture in Hollywood often.
So Dan, how did you come by these, if I could call them pastoral skills? I mean, obviously God's given you some gifts in that way, but where did you kind of cut your teeth on?
I'm a unique hybrid. I've spent 41 years working in Hollywood.
Right.
I started in comedy. I worked in radio. I worked in television.
You've been a producer?
I've been a producer. I used to supervise The Price is Right and David Letterman and all these different shows. But I'm ordained, and I've been on 4 different pastoral staffs. So my heart has always been to minister within wherever God plants me. On The Price is Right, I had 100 people on the crew under me.
Yeah.
So I was able to serve them not by being a jerk and not by being, having John 3:16 on my T-shirt or shaking my Bible, but just living my life among them. as Jesus did, and showing each person I cared. And pretty soon, the crustiest of stage managers would find me over by, craft services and say, hey, I just found out I got cancer.
Right.
And they would say, can you do what you do? Well, what I do is pray, And I'll tell you, one of the greatest compliments I ever received was I actually left CBS to go pastor. It was an obedience to God thing.
Yeah.
And I went into Bob Barker's office and I said, Bob, I'm going to resign from Price is Right. And he goes, oh, I hate to lose you. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go pastor. And he paused for a minute and he said, Dan, that's right. He says, I've always seen you as the pastor of Price is Right.
Wow.
And that, to me, was my good and faithful servant moment. It's like, yes, that's, I did what God called me to do there. So that's my heart behind it.
Excellent. So we're going to come back to the leaders of tomorrow, but Peggy, let me shift gears here and hear a little bit more about your background in Wind Rider and just your background.
I have a very unique background in the sense that entertainment and the media world was never on my radar. It wasn't a lane I was in. I just fell in love with this remarkable man that felt a call to media. And not only that, I say remarkable because and we were young, 19 and 21, but that he had this, even then at that young age, this passion to say, this is not just my life, this is our life together. And by that, he felt like, I want to expose you to kind of what I'm doing. And it could simply have been to be on the same page together, to get to know him and his talent, his calling, but also for prayer support. The media industry is, highs and lows. I mean, it's feast and it's famine. And this is really important for unity, that you be in on this together. So in that, he's exposed me to, and I think just to save money, early days, I toured with them to do sound because we didn't have to pay a sound man.
Right.
So I learned that, the cadence of the show and different things. And he brought me in on do voiceover on albums, and as well as radio shows and co-hosting. Yeah, I helped co-host on a few times for him on the radio. And then even with CBS to bring me in to understand studio production and operations more within the offices there would help out. So these things, this eclectic experiences, these little deposits.
Well, eclectic is an understatement, Peggy. I think you're the only woman that I've ever met who has been married to both a pastor and a Hollywood producer.
Well, can you imagine how hard...
Without having two marriages.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It wasn't easy asking for my hand in marriage when my dad kept saying, what do you do? Well, I'm a comedian. Well, okay, now, I wire houses because I'm an electrician, and you are...
I tell jokes on a stage, and people give me money.
And you get paid for that?
And I get paid for that.
But he knew I loved him, so that was that. But you know what? What happened uniquely for me in my case is that I had not just an interest, but it really just showed that I had an aptitude for it. So that I just kind of nosedived. I was a learner and a practitioner at the same time. That is unique. And what has been wonderful is that it's really been a place of miracles for me, in the sense that I have had to realize the fact that I'm continually asked to be at the table, sometimes by respected media professionals who want me to either be part of the process or to lead the process, and that I had to get past that voice in my head that said inadequate for whatever reason.
Yes.
And realize that God's good plans in placing me there.
Yes.
And when I learned to silence that voice, and then I learned to step into that, well, God began to open up great opportunities for me. Yeah. And part of that ended up being valuable enough to where a film program at Biola University hired me to come in to be an adjunct there and to also manage their special projects. And I got to know your Reg Grant very well as I directed the Biola Media Conference for years. And part of that process came developing a program called Wind Rider at Sundance.
And what's that program around? What is it? What's the concept behind Wind Rider?
Well, for the last 15 years, it's we actually showed up with just two universities at the time, Biola and Fuller, so undergrads and seminary students, talking about, kind of intersection of faith and culture. And we went in there to see, this is the flashpoint. This is where cultural dialogue is taking place. And there's nothing like independent filmmaking where these are passion projects. You're not going to make any money usually on those. So what is this unction? What does that say about the human condition? What are they talking about? Like Jesus, who do they say that I am? We thought this would be a holy conversation that we would unpack separately on our own, which is what we did. We watched these films and formed a bit of an apologetic response to them, and it really shaped them as storytellers and actually advanced their sense of calling. Because if the world is groping and talking about faith, God, marriage, all these things, and sometimes getting it winsomely, beautifully close, or right, sometimes horribly wrong.
Right.
But there's things to be learned about.
At least
that
they're talking
as well.
about it.
At least they're talking about that. This could be a conversation we could maybe enliven. We came with respect that we were sitting in to be listeners and learners, and the conversation. But then what happens? We began to take filmmakers, bring them back to our little forum classroom.
Right.
And there we, graciously honored their craft, asked about their stories, and it was to their surprise sometimes is that we would sometimes mention these thoughtful spiritual themes that we found in their films, and they would be so deeply moved because, and even say things like, I wish I could take credit for that my film did that in you, and sometimes have tears in their eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
Saying that is the most, because as a director, can you imagine that's the...
Well, you celebrated that deepest part of them.
Yes.
They've labored so hard to get this into some format that they could get it to you, and you were moved or touched or gained insight from it, and to know that they had made that connection. I mean, it doesn't get much better for a storyteller.
No, it didn't. Yeah. And so it's just grown. We're now 250 students and about 25 plus universities, grad, undergrad, and seminary students.
Right.
DTS and being one of them.
I was going to say, you mentioned Reg Grant, who is our chairman of the department in media arts and worship. And every summer, Tim Basselin, who's also a assistant professor there,
and a dear friend to us at Winwriter,
takes a group of DTS students up to Sundance Film Festival and lets them sort of participate in that whole experience of watching films and reflecting and meeting people that make films. And it's really the only way that younger storytellers can begin to hone their craft.
And these films are not as neat and tidy. Independent films.
Kind of like life.
Kind of like life.
Kind of.
And it's like, it's sometimes I think the best movies aren't the ones that just answer all the questions, but maybe ask, provide answers, but ask the best questions. Let's put it that way. Yeah. And so that's.
And I think that's what's so exciting about the independent film movement, and particularly the top one is Sundance. Is I always liken it to Paul in Athens. What does it say? Acts 17. He goes to the marketplace daily, and he's seeing what is the cultural narrative. What are they talking about? What are they grappling with? And he's slowly forming a response, and he uses their vernacular, uses their unknown God statue. But, excuse me, the Sundance Film Festival, I kind of feel is like the Athens of today.
Yeah, right.
The cinematic
it's where
Athens,
the conversation is taking place.
It is. And what's happening is it's happening as an incubator. It's kind of forming that conversation that we have witnessed through the 16 years, I think now, that we've been there. It's the conversation is what the general culture is talking about year, 2, 3 years down the road.
Right.
It's like forming there. And sadly, often the church isn't even forming a response until 4 years down the road.
Right.
We're trying to play catch up sometimes on some of these topics. So we love the fact that there is a Christian presence, a vibrant Christian presence at Sundance, and being part of that cultural conversation in the very beginning.
And you'd be surprised to learn that Sundance is grateful for us as well.
Oh, yeah.
They approached us last year and said, we were asking this question was amongst our own executive team. And where are the independent communities that we're serving here at Sundance? Where's the loudest one? Where's that voice? And it was unanimously decided that it would be the Winwriter Forum.
How good is that?
And that it's a group of Christians, and they brought our leaders in, our CEOs, and they talked with them. They said, "Do you realize that you are our number one block ticket buyers?
Wow.
Not only that, you are you have a very small footprint. You don't take hotels for us because you have somehow galvanized the faith community at Park City, Utah, to where you have people opening their doors, host homes,
Wow.
to students that are from every different denomination. First of all, that seems
Right.
like a miracle to
Right
them.
there, right.
But what was really sweet is that they said that, and we, for the last 15 years, have heard our own filmmakers come back in exit interviews and say, when we asked them what was their most transformative Q&A experience while you were here, and they say, who knew? But it was a group of Christians at the Windwriter
wow.
Forum who asked the most thoughtful questions. And they're the ones that would often say, well, we'll give you 15 minutes, and then we'd be vacuuming around their feet because they wouldn't leave.
Right.
But so that shows you the power of faithful presence.
Yes.
And doing a community good. We haven't changed anything about the ethos of who we are, and they're not asking us to change. They said we'd like to come alongside, and now they're an official sponsor of Windwriter Forum, and they're helping us and facilitating opportunity for us.
So let me ask this question. I'm seeing an interesting contrast here. You've got this group of Christians in Windwriter and so forth that Sundance Film Festival says, wow, we really like interfacing with you. Yes, great questions. You treat us well. The filmmakers love what you're about. They don't get all of it, but that's okay. So there's some Christians there. And then meanwhile, you have sort of the stereotype of, the Christian in our culture. They're loud. You talked about the loudest voice. Faith is usually not something we talk about in loud voices, and when we do, we don't do it well, right?
Yes.
And so there's that whole stereotype over here. And it leads me to this question, which y'all are in a perfect position. It's really two sides of the question. One is, what do Christians most need to know about media leaders? And what do media leaders need to most know about Christians?
That's a good question.
Get the sense that, in the main, we're talking past each other.
Yeah. The media leaders, they need to understand that the real heartbeat of why we believe what we believe. They don't need to see the outer expressions that sometimes are really
out there,
way out there.
Yeah,
it's not uncommon again you talk to a media leader and you say, "How do you see Christians?" And they'll say, "Well, I see them as a bunch of ticked off people.
Right?
They're an angry mob."
Right.
I'll say, that's heartbreaking. Why do you feel that way? And they say, because I only have...
Because I got people protesting outside my studio.
They're protesting out my studio. They're sending hate mail. They're doing all these things. And, so we try to share with them that the heartbeat is love. Jesus said, you'll know us by our love. But... so they need to understand that we can be a friend. We don't have an agenda. We can just talk to them like we were talking earlier as a pastoral voice, a friendly voice, a trusted voice. So we can, in Jeremiah, he's talking about your exiles in Babylon, and the Lord speaks to Jeremiah saying, go there for the good of the city, plant. And that's what we need to do. We need to let Hollywood know we're here to do you good. We're not here to complain about you. We're here to do you good, to bring good to your programming or what you're doing.
If I could just interject there for a second, Dan. If I understand you correctly, because you used the Daniel example and the exiles, that media executive that you're talking with, and you're saying, "I'm here to serve you. Is there a way I can be useful to you? Can I pray for you?"
Yeah.
At the same time, you may detest something that media executive's company has put out there. And you think, I would never show my kids that. I would never want people to watch that. But now we're not dealing with that product. You're dealing with this person.
Right.
It's a big difference.
A big difference. And you articulate it well. I'm not afraid to object to something. But I don't do it out of anger or, you better change it. I do it out of explaining why.
Right.
You had this. Do you really want our culture to be feeding on that? You shared, I think, Plato earlier about, the storytellers lead our culture. And, do we really want that out there, that kind of thing? And specifically with Christians. And it's like what Christians need to know about them. They don't know us.
Right.
they don't know us. We pulled out of Hollywood.
Right.
Again, if you really know the history of the church, Hollywood started with the church. Mm-hmm. The church embraced this new medium called cinema because they thought this is a great way of getting the gospel message out.
Well, theater itself started with the church.
It did. You go way back, absolutely. And so they embraced the Christian audience. Of course, we were totally a Christian nation, and they knew that was their audience.
Right.
But they also, in the first, I forgot the time frame of cinema, there were 100 biblical epics made. So I mean, so they were doing so much towards the church. But we pulled out. So what happens is my MFA works in screenwriting, and one of the rules is you write what you know. Well, we as Christians often say, why are Christians always portrayed as hypocritical, puritanical, blah, 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 or why are they, serial killers or maniacs, wackos, Well, they don't necessarily always know Christians. And the lazy writer they want to put a Christian character in, so they'll go to default and just, okay, what's the stereotype? Okay, they're this. I'll put that in.
Which they quite likely have already gotten from some other media form.
Yes.
From another media source, yeah.
Not an actual Christian.
And maybe it was reinforced by someone they did meet.
That's right, the ones they did know.
Yeah, that wasn't the real deal. But the real screenwriter will say, I want to know their heartbeat. I want to really do a 3D, authentic portrayal of a Christian. And we're finding, as they find those, and they're friends with them, it's like, wait a minute. We had a film, I won't go into the whole thing of the film, but we had a film that at Sundance that portrayed Christians so well. And we watched the film, and a lady in the audience stood up and said, I'm a Christian. I just want to thank you for how you portrayed Christians. Mm-hmm. It was so wonderful. You really reflected who we are. Mm-hmm. And the filmmaker, who was not a Christian, said, I wouldn't be doing right by the Christian community if I didn't portray it that way, because on my journey, every Christian I met, that's what they were.
Wow.
They were kind to me. They supported me. Yeah, every human being has quirks.
Yeah.
But they were, at their heart, they were so for my good. They cared for me. So we need the creatives in Hollywood to understand who we are.
Yeah.
And what our heartbeat is.
I love with Master Media, Dan gets this remarkable, holy opportunity, I am telling you, to be in these offices. And and he does. He prays for God to give him an on-ramp and help me to see it, because God's wooing this person. And so he steps into that. And oftentimes when he goes to prayer with these people, I mean, there's in a way an exchange that happens, because as he prays for them, they're serving under another kingdom, right? They're being driven in a way, and so, but he takes them, he ushers them into the kingdom of God.
Exactly.
And in that place, they're not receiving condemnation, but they're also understanding that I'm a man or woman and I have feet of clay.
Right.
And this is not something that I have nurtured at all. And so it is all of a sudden this level place that you meet. And I've had the same thing with programmers at Sundance that we've worked together, and we've gone out for coffee afterwards. And I had this one gal turn her chair to me, and so we had spent weeks building towards this program. We did it together with my colleagues, and then all of a sudden I get this moment with her that you would have never gotten elsewhere. And she says, okay, so now there's I would say evangelicals or fundamental. I'm not really sure exactly where you guys are. And I mean, I know I'm kind of over here. And I said, no, you're articulating this beautifully. I think that the far, far right and doesn't necessarily speak for me, or the far, far left doesn't necessarily speak for you, right? She goes, yes. I go, those are polarizing voices. Yeah. I said, but look at us. We found our place in the middle to meet within film, where we can learn about the world of the other. And I told her a little bit about how Jesus rode, and how how he navigated these situations, reaching people's perspective, what religious should be, and yet here's this relationship I want to show you and demonstrate you. I got to give her the gospel in the most beautiful way, but it was through this faithful presence. And Dan, I think that's what Dan brings so beautifully at Master Media. It's a faithful presence, and then God opens these holy moments.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing you got these media leaders, and then you've got Christians, and one thing that's true about both of them is they have a heart and they have a story. And what you've done is to let those two hearts and those two stories begin to connect.
Right.
And we're not now talking about this big production and all these cultural realities about it, and we're going to critique it, and we're down to the human level.
Yes.
The retail level.
Yeah.
The human condition.
And it's like, you've got a job you're doing, and I've got a calling I'm called to. Let's talk. Let's understand each other.
Yes.
And if you're the Christian in that relationship, of course, you've got this relationship with God, and they begin to feel that, sense that. They can't even always articulate what is that.
And the beauty is, we're working in an arena where there is just the love of story.
Well, that's it.
And then that is, God has a love of story.
Yes, he does.
Scripture, so much of it is story. And Jesus said, we used to tell this to our film students all the time, the kingdom of heaven is like, and he'd tell a story.
Right.
It is how God has wired us. And it speaks to the human condition so easily. So we can meet in that place.
Well, I have a saying I frequently use, which is that's the best way to know somebody is through their story.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I have been told the Italians have a saying, I cannot know you until I have dined with you. I think the same would be true. I cannot know you until I've listened to your story.
That's right.
Amen.
That's right.
And until I really have done that, in a way, I'm not even in a position to pass comment on where you ended up
That's
in
right.
your values, your beliefs, your product or whatever.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Peggy mentioned the world of the other. That's what we love about so much about story or film, is when film's at its best, it's escorting us into the world of the other, a person that we're not familiar with, that we haven't ever met, or an environment, a location that we've never been to, or a situation that we just previously can't relate to, and it puts us in that world. And then when we can kind of find ourselves in the world and say, I can understand, man, if that was facing me, I'd react that way too, I think. And suddenly we kind of get this common narrative, and that's that kind of holy place that you can meet in and really start talking when you understand one another. It's like maybe that guy's bitter because of his story in the back. That's why he, and rather than just dismiss him, oh, that guy's bitter, but it's like maybe there's a reason if I understand his story and sit down, have a cup of coffee and talk it over with him.
Well, one thing that occurs to me as well here is you mentioned the word the gospel a minute ago, Peggy, and I think one of the unfortunate things we've allowed our Christian tradition to do is to somewhat reduce the gospel or to minimize the gospel into what I might call a transaction. In other words, I've got to get you to the point where you say certain things to know that you're over the line into the kingdom, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That's my goal.
Yeah.
Well, that's transactional.
Yeah.
And if I go into any conversation with that being the goal, what's wrong with that? Well, the problem is human beings are not meant to be that, certainly in their heart and in their soul, transactional. They're meant to be relational. When you look at Jesus in the Gospels, every person he interacts with, it's relational. He's always speaking into their heart, and he's not looking to, I've got to get you to say something here, do something, okay? I'm going to throw something out and let you respond to it. And however you respond, then we'll go from there, and vice versa.
Yeah.
But that humanizes the thing. And it seems to me what you're talking about is, bringing Christ into somebody's office, somebody's home, somebody's situation, but doing it in a way that you're incarnating the gospel, not just confronting people with the gospel in a transactional way.
That's exactly what's happening when I was talking about being in that office and them saying, what do you want? See, it's a shift because suddenly they see and understand that I'm not looking at the chair of authority they're sitting in.
Right.
I'm looking at who's sitting in it.
Yes.
In them.
Because everyone else that goes in their office is seeing that chair of authority. I have a real close friend, He was at a real high level at a network, and he was everybody's best friend. He's invited to every party. He was, whatever. They let him go.
He wasn't their best friend. He was their best contact.
Best
That's
contact.
right.
Well, that's what he
right.
discovered.
He discovered
Yeah.
And no more invites. He's the loneliest guy in town. But he realized they liked that chair.
Yeah.
They didn't like me.
And
they didn't care about
the day
me.
after he was gone, they were back there for
They were
the
back
next
there for the
person.
next guy.
Right. In that chair.
See, there's another thing. You were asking what the people need to understand about Hollywood is there are those that really have an agenda against Christians.
Yeah, sure.
They're definitely that segment. There's that segment in every area of life.
Industry.
You go to a plumber's convention, there's going to be those, Right. It's in every area of life. But for the most part, Hollywood operates on profits.
Right.
We
It's a business.
always say there's two words to show business. And they're there to make a profit. And right now, because of the way things are, and because movie budgets are now $2 million plus, there's a lot on the line. It's really risky. So what is created is there's this spirit of fear that is all around the media industry. There's this fear from executives that my next decision will be my last decision. If I greenlight a $200+ million film and it tanks, I'm gone. Pack the bag now. Same with an actor and actress. They think my next role could be my last. My looks are fading. I'm getting too many wrinkles. I've aged out of what they want, or I'll never deliver that type of performance again. There's this great fear and insecurity.
Wow.
And the creatives are probably the most insecure people on the planet.
Absolutely.
We're always looking for affirmation. Was it good? Was it good? Was it good?
You're always on that tightrope.
You're always that tightrope,
Yes.
So to have a loving presence, just to go in and say, it's all right, you're good, and affirm them, that's a kind thing to do.
And even help them with it's some of its identity issues. Can you imagine the rejection that these actors have to deal with constantly, and to come back and say that I am enough? So you'd be pleased to know that there's about 10,000 professing Christians that are in Hollywood today.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons, and part of what Master Media does is it invests in them as well to help them see their job as missional. Dan can't get into all the rooms that they're at.
Right.
But if the church, if believers who are in the arts can see their job as missional, they can do the same thing that he's doing and make change.
That's one of the shifts. I mentioned earlier, Bill, that Master Media, when it was founded, there were 9 people you need to reach. Well, now there's countless, and I can't. And my team, I have a team in New York and a team in Hollywood. We can't reach everybody, but you realize, okay, I can't get it in that person's office, but this person who's a Christian is in that office every day. They work alongside him. So let me pour into them.
Yep.
It's that ministry model. Let me pour into them and help them to shift their thinking. I'm not here for fame and fortune. I'm here on assignment from God.
Right.
Missionally to love on the media industry for the betterment of Hollywood. And pour into them and let them talk to them and be that Christian presence.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that, because sometimes when Christians hear the term missional, we can get back to that transactional thing.
Right.
Oh, I get it. My job is really a platform for me to evangelize people. Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, in one sense it is, but it's a misunderstanding of missional.
Yes.
God calls people into media, say, and the arts and entertainment who are Christians, because he wants them to go into doing art or doing media or doing entertainment the way Jesus would do art or media or entertainment were he living in their skin. Like the work itself matters.
Yes.
Yes.
God wants good art made. He wants good entertainment made. He wants good media done, right? Just like he wants the cobbler to make good shoes,
Right.
or he wants the doctor to do good medicine.
Yes.
The work itself has value because God's gifted you and called you into that line of work.
Yeah.
In the doing of the work, how you interface with other human beings is also all a part of it, because that too needs to be an authentic presence of Christ in that place. That you're, Corinthians says, an ambassador of the King.
Yeah.
I'm here doing this work, but I'm representing the king.
Yes.
I need to
Yes.
treat you the way that king wants you to be treated.
Yeah.
We did a large event at CBS. It's called The Legacy. We did it for the National Day of Prayer, and we invited about 450 leading entertainment professionals. And wonderful, wonderful actor, David Oyelowo. Honey, tell him what David said. It was remarkable.
David Oyelowo, if you're not familiar with him, he played Martin Luther King in the film Selma.
Right.
Wonderful actor, deeply passionate about the Lord. And he got up there and he was doing this call to excellence. You know, if we're going to reflect our God, you know, let's be excellent, because our God is excellent, and he's a God of beauty and detail. And he was talking about, he says, you know, at the bottom of the ocean, where nobody can see it, there are the most beautiful, vibrant colors and shapes and all these things. He goes, that's unnecessary.
Exactly.
You know, God didn't need to put it down there, you know, where nobody's going to see it. But he did, because he's a God of beauty. And that's the same thing. You were talking about this excellence. And to get to the second part of our mission, to be an encouraging voice of experience.
Yeah.
As we're going around to universities and talking to film students, we're calling them to be Daniels in Babylon. And we look at three things that Daniel utilized to really thrive in Babylon. Number one was his commitment to excellence. It says 2 or 3 times in the book of Daniel, he did it with excellence. He did it the best of the best. And Hollywood brings the best of storytellers. And so you want to be more excellent if you can.
Yeah.
So approach it with excellence.
You certainly don't want to do your best.
And you never want to say it's good enough for the Lord.
Right.
You know, it's good enough for a Christian thing. Don't do that. Say, no, I want this to be the best film. The other thing is he was strong in his convictions, uncompromising. Don't go in there and play by their rules. You know, don't assimilate into the culture where it's like, oh, that's what it takes to make it. Because one of the things that's so wonderful, if you look at the history of all the great filmmakers, one of the things, among others, that set them apart was they had a unique voice. I challenge some film students, watch a great master filmmaker and turn the sound down. Just by watching what he does, you can probably tell me who that filmmaker is.
Yeah.
You know, they have that unique style. You have a uniqueness in you that you're walking in the kingdom.
Exactly.
And your relationship with Christ brings a lot to the table that makes you a wonderful voice. So utilize that and be strong in that, uncompromising. But the third thing he did is he didn't drink from the king's cup. And like, you know, in Hollywood, the king's cup is fame and fortune. Don't pursue that.
Yeah.
It's empty. Right. I know so many people that was what they pursued. They didn't get it, and they deserted Hollywood bitter. I know others that pursued that and got it, and then they were empty. It's like, man, it's not what it's called. It left them empty. And so go in and say, this is my assignment from the Lord. I'm going to bring that presence to the Lord joyfully and just, you know, be that loving kingdom presence.
And we need the spectrum. We need, you know, there's a space for overt messages, but there's also really this remarkable space for where the powers in the subtext.
Right.
And is the conviction and all that emanates from who this character is, as opposed to a process, the didactyl process that he goes through. So things like a chariot of fire.
Right.
So you have someone who is innately who they are, and this resonates with this phenomenal story. So we're preparing students, we feel the onus to prepare them for it all, being older and having walked this road a bit. But part of why we're on this 16 a university tour, in a sense, is actually responding to something we see God doing ahead of us. And that is, there are film programs everywhere that are burgeoning. The Lord is up to something. God is calling young storytellers in multifaceted, not just film, but in all sorts of arena in the digital space, and designers and things. Because it's one of the growing majors on every Christian campus. So we said, okay, God is up to something. And he is, you know, priming the pump. and there's this little thread we're seeing that has been very hopeful and encouraging. And that is that these students they want to be at their best and all these things, but they also want to come and bring a wholeness in who they are in this process.
Right.
So they're listening to the story of the road that we've taken, the fault, the struggles we've had, where we've had, the margins we needed to place on our life,
Right.
the importance of keeping a Sabbath. And we're just letting them know, listen, if you want to thrive in Hollywood, you're going to have to make these decisions, make these choices. Find your tribe. You need to make sure that you are with like-minded people who have your calling, who get you.
Find your faith community, put margins in your life, build relationships, build your family, put your marriage, first, and you're raising your children. Come in with everything at the table.
Well, I couldn't be more excited about that particular part of your work, the voice of experience to the rising leaders. As the father of a storyteller, I can tell you, all that you've said is absolutely the case. And I would say to our listeners who are not storytellers, they're not those people. But Christians can come around those storytellers as they're coming along and coming up and surround them with support. I think that you probably know this better than most. You mentioned creatives are some of the most insecure people in the world. So as they're trying to put their life together, put their career together, they need voices around them of support, encouragement, prayer, wisdom, not condemnation, not criticism, not knocking what the calling is that God has given to them. I just can't thank Dan and Peggy enough for coming to be with us. Rupple, thank you very much. This has just been an outstanding time, and we could go on and on. Thank you for your work. God bless your work out there in both coasts. But thank you for being on the Table podcast today.
Thank you for having us. We've enjoyed it.
Absolute blessing. Thank you.
Well, great. If you have a topic you would like us to consider here on the Table podcast, just email us at thetable@dts.edu. And for the Table, I'm Bill Hendricks. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for listening to the Table Podcast. For more podcasts like this one, visit dts.edu/thetable. Dallas Theological Seminary. Teach truth, love well.